It began without warning. No announcement, no omen, no sign that anything was about to go wrong. In the summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg was like many others in Europe. Crowded, restless, worn down by years of hardship. The streets were narrow, the air was heavy, and life moved slowly under the weight of uncertainty. People had learned to endure. They endured famine. They endured disease. They endured fear. Death was not a stranger here. Plagues had passed through before, leaving behind silence and graves. War and hunger were constant companions. And yet, what was about to happen did not resemble any disaster the city had known. It did not arrive with sickness. It did not arrive with fire. It arrived with movement. One woman stepped into the street and began to dance. Her name was Frau Trophia. She did not dance for celebration. She did not dance for joy. Witnesses later said her movements looked strained, uncontrolled, as if her body had begun moving on its own. At first, passers-by laughed. They thought it was a performance, a moment of eccentricity. But the laughter did not last. Minutes passed, then hours. Frau Trophia did not stop. Her feet struck the stone road again and again. Her arms moved wildly. Her face was pale. Her breathing labored. Those who tried to help her were pushed away. She could not explain why she was dancing. She did not ask for music. She did not respond to reason. Her body simply continued. As night fell, torches were lit. Shadows stretched across the walls, and still she danced. By morning, her movements were slower. Her body was exhausted, but she did not stop. This was not joy. This was compulsion. The following day, something even stranger happened. Another person joined her, then another. Men and women began to move in the streets. At first, only a few, then dozens. Their movements were erratic, violent at times. They twisted, they stomped, they spun until they collapsed. Some screamed, some cried, some danced in silence, eyes unfocused. They danced until their shoes fell apart, until their feet bled, until their bodies gave out. And when they collapsed, others took their place. The city watched in disbelief. No one understood what they were seeing. This was not a festival. There was no music, no leader, no explanation. The dancers did not appear possessed in the religious sense. They were not speaking in tongues. They were not making proclamations. They were simply unable to stop moving. Doctors were called. Clergy were summoned. City officials gathered. No one could explain why healthy people were suddenly dancing themselves into collapse. The heat of the summer only made it worse. Bodies overheated. Dehydration set in quickly. Some dancers were carried away unconscious. Others rose again and continued. The streets of Strasbourg became a place of confusion, of fear, of constant motion. Parents pulled children indoors. Shops closed early. People watched from behind shutters. Every hour brought more dancers, and with each one, the question grew louder. Why were they dancing, and why could they not stop? This was not a performance. This was not madness in the way people understood it. It was something else, something that did not fit into any category. And as days passed, the city would soon learn that the dancing was not harmless. It could kill. To understand why the dancing spread so quickly, it is necessary to understand the world these people lived in. Strasbourg in 1518 was not a healthy city. For years, the region had suffered from poor harvests. Grain prices rose sharply. Bread became scarce. Many families lived on the edge of hunger. Malnutrition weakened bodies, and it weakened minds. Disease was never far away. Plague outbreaks had returned again and again across Europe. People lived with the constant expectation that illness could arrive at any moment. Medical knowledge was limited. Doctors relied on ancient texts, bloodletting, herbal remedies, astrology. Few treatments actually worked. Religion shaped daily life. God was seen as both protector and punisher. Misfortune was often interpreted as divine judgment. Suffering was not random. It was meaningful. And fear was a part of faith. In this environment, stress was constant. People slept poorly. They worked hard. They worried about food. They worried about sickness. They worried about salvation. When something went wrong, explanations were often supernatural. Curses, demons, divine punishment. The idea that an unseen force could control the body did not feel impossible. It felt familiar. When the first dancers appeared, many believed they were witnessing a spiritual affliction. Some whispered that the dancers had been cursed. Others believed they were possessed. A few thought the movements were a sign of repentance forced upon the body. Saints were invoked. Prayers were spoken, but the dancing continued. City authorities felt pressure to respond. They could not ignore what was happening. The streets were filling with exhausted bodies. Public order was at risk. People were frightened, and fear spreads faster than reason. At first, officials tried to restrain the dancers. They attempted to move them indoors, to confine them, but this only seemed to make things worse. The dancers resisted. Some became violent. Others collapsed from exhaustion. The authorities then made a decision that would later seem deeply ironic. They concluded that the dancers were suffering from a condition that required release, not restraint. According to some physicians, the dancers' bodies were overheated. Their blood was believed to be too hot, and the only way to cure them was to let them dance it out. So the city did something extraordinary. They encouraged the dancing. Musicians were hired. Platforms were built. Public spaces were opened. The idea was simple. If the dancers could move freely, the condition would pass. Instead, it escalated. Music did not calm the dancers, it energized them. More people joined. Some claimed they felt compelled to move after watching others. Their legs trembled, their hearts raced, and soon they were dancing too. What had begun as a single case became a collective phenomenon. The city's response, though well-intentioned, may have accelerated the spread. Movement became visible, contagious. The sight of bodies dancing without control triggered something in those already under strain. As days passed, the number of dancers grew. Some accounts describe dozens, others describe hundreds. Not all at once, but enough to alarm the city. People danced until their shoes fell apart, until their feet bled, until their bodies failed. Some collapsed and never stood again. There were reports of heart attacks, of strokes, of fatal exhaustion. Death became part of the pattern, and yet still, the dancing did not stop. The city had created a stage for suffering, and no one knew how to shut it down. By the second week, Strasbourg was no longer dealing with isolated cases. The dancing had become a crisis. The streets filled with bodies in constant motion. Some moved slowly, swaying back and forth. Others jumped and spun with frightening intensity. There was no rhythm, no shared pattern. Each dancer seemed trapped in their own struggle. Observers described faces twisted with pain, eyes unfocused, mouths open, gasping for air. This was not celebration. It was endurance. People danced until they collapsed. Some were carried away unconscious. Others lay on the ground shaking, muscles locked in spasms. A few regained their strength, only to rise and continue again. Medical records from the period are incomplete, but later accounts suggest that several people died, not from a single cause, but from exhaustion, from dehydration, from heart failure. The human body can only endure so much continuous movement, especially in summer heat, especially when already weakened by hunger and illness. The presence of death changed how the city perceived the dancers. At first, there had been curiosity, then confusion. Now there was fear. Parents kept children indoors. Merchants closed their shops. People avoided public squares. But avoidance was not always possible. The dancing was everywhere. Those who watched for too long sometimes felt strange sensations themselves. A tightness in the chest, a trembling in the legs, an urge to move. Some later claimed that the dancing spread through sight alone, that watching others dance was enough to trigger the compulsion. Whether this was true or not, the belief itself was powerful, and belief shapes behavior. The authorities, now desperate, began to reverse their earlier decision. The music was stopped. The platforms were dismantled. Dancers were removed from public view. But even this did not end the outbreak immediately. Many continued to move in private spaces, homes, courtyards, church grounds. The city sought help beyond medicine. Religious leaders were consulted more urgently. The outbreak was reframed as spiritual, a punishment, a test, a sign. Some believed the dancers were cursed by Saint Vitus, a figure long associated with involuntary movement. This belief was not new. For centuries, strange physical conditions had been attributed to saints and spirits. Pilgrimages were organized. Dancers were transported to shrines outside the city. There, rituals were performed. Prayers were spoken. Relics were presented. The dancers were fitted with red shoes marked with sacred symbols. The goal was not to restrain movement, but to redirect it. Slowly, the number of new cases began to decline. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but noticeably. Fewer people joined. Some dancers recovered. Others simply stopped. Weeks after the first woman stepped into the street, the movement faded. The city returned to stillness, but the memory did not fade with it. No one could say exactly why the dancing had begun, or why it had ended. The explanations offered at the time reflected the limits of knowledge: spiritual affliction, divine punishment, medical imbalance. None were fully convincing. Centuries later, historians and scientists would revisit the case. They would propose new theories: psychological stress, social contagion, ergot poisoning, neurological disorders. Each explanation would attempt to impose order on chaos. But like the people of Strasbourg, modern researchers face the same obstacle. The past does not speak clearly. Records are fragmented, witnesses are long gone, and experience cannot be fully reconstructed. What remains is a pattern: a community under extreme stress, an outbreak of involuntary movement, a rapid spread, and a gradual disappearance. The dancing plague of 1518 stands as one of the strangest events in recorded history, not because it defies all explanation, but because no single explanation is sufficient. It forces us to confront the idea that human behavior can shift in unexpected ways, that the boundary between mind and body is not always clear, and that under certain conditions, entire communities can be swept into actions they do not choose. The dancers did not want to dance. They could not stop. And when it ended, they were left with exhaustion, with shame, with confusion, and with no clear answer to the question that haunted Strasbourg. Why them? Why then? And what exactly had taken control? In the centuries since the dancing stopped, scholars have tried to explain what happened in Strasbourg. Several theories have emerged. Each offers a different way of understanding the same disturbing event, and each leaves important questions unanswered. One of the most commonly cited explanations is ergot poisoning. Ergot is a fungus that grows on rye, a staple grain in medieval Europe. When consumed, it can cause severe physical and psychological symptoms: convulsions, hallucinations, burning sensations, loss of control over the body. In extreme cases, ergot poisoning can lead to uncontrollable movements. At first glance, this theory seems convincing. Poor harvests, damp conditions, a population already malnourished. All of these factors were present in Strasbourg. However, the theory has serious limitations. Ergot poisoning usually causes violent convulsions, not rhythmic movement. Victims often experience intense pain and confusion. Many become bedridden. They do not dance for days at a time. And ergot poisoning would likely have affected entire households, not individuals scattered across the city. Most importantly, ergot outbreaks do not stop gradually. They end when contaminated food is no longer consumed. The timeline in Strasbourg does not match this pattern. Another explanation focuses on psychology, specifically mass psychogenic illness, the idea that extreme stress can manifest as physical symptoms shared by a group. This phenomenon is well documented. It occurs in schools, in factories, in communities under pressure. The people of Strasbourg were living under extraordinary strain: hunger, disease, religious anxiety, social instability. The dancing may have been an expression of that stress, an unconscious release, a bodily response to conditions that had become unbearable. Once the behavior appeared, it spread through observation. Seeing others dance created expectation. Expectation triggered response. Response reinforced belief. In this framework, the dancing was not deliberate. but it was not caused by a toxin either. It was a reaction, real, physical, and deeply human. This theory explains why the dancing spread socially, why it affected some and not others, why it ended when the social environment changed. But it too has weaknesses. Mass psychogenic illness rarely leads to death, and it does not usually persist for weeks at such intensity. The scale of the outbreak remains difficult to explain. A third perspective blends multiple factors. Rather than searching for a single cause, it suggests that several forces were at work simultaneously. Physical weakness from malnutrition, psychological stress from constant fear, religious beliefs that frame suffering as meaningful, and social reinforcement that allowed behaviors to spread. In this view, the dancing plague was not a disease, it was a moment, a convergence, a breakdown of normal boundaries between mind, body, and society. This explanation may be the most unsatisfying, because it offers no clear answer, no single villain, no simple cause. But history rarely offers simplicity. What makes the dancing plague so unsettling is not that it defies science, it is that it resists reduction. Each theory captures part of the truth. None capture all of it, and perhaps that is the lesson. Human behavior is not governed by one system alone. It is shaped by environment, by belief, by fear, by the stories people tell themselves about suffering. In Strasbourg, those stories were powerful. They gave meaning to pain, they gave structure to chaos, and in doing so, they shaped reality itself. The dancers were not pretending, they were not acting. They were responding to a world that had become unbearable. Their bodies expressed what their words could not. Movement became language, endurance became ritual, and exhaustion became release. The dancing plague ended, but it did not resolve. It left behind questions that still trouble historians today. Questions about how communities react under pressure, about how belief can shape physical experience, and about how easily the boundary between control and compulsion can collapse. When the dancing finally ended, Strasbourg did not celebrate. There was no relief, only silence. The streets returned to stillness, but the memory of movement lingered. People avoided speaking about what had happened. Some felt shame, others felt fear, many felt confusion. There was no clear explanation to offer future generations, no single cause to record. The event slipped quietly into history, preserved only in fragments. Yet centuries later, the dancing plague of 1518 continues to unsettle those who learn about it. Not because it was violent, but because it was uncontrollable. It challenges the assumption that human beings always act by choice. It suggests that under certain conditions, the body can override intention, that social pressure, fear, and belief can combine to produce behavior that feels foreign even to the person experiencing it. Modern society often views itself as immune to such events, more rational, more informed, more scientific. But the underlying forces that shaped Strasbourg have not disappeared. Stress still accumulates, fear still spreads, communities still respond to crisis collectively. The difference is not in human nature, it is in the stories we use to explain what we experience. The dancing plague reminds us that explanations evolve. What was once seen as divine punishment is now framed as psychological stress. What was once blamed on spirits is now analyzed through neuroscience and sociology. But explanation does not erase the experience itself. The people who danced were not symbols, they were individuals. They felt pain, they felt exhaustion, they felt loss of control. And for a brief period, they lived inside a reality that made no sense. That is why this event endures, not because it is strange, but because it is familiar in an uncomfortable way. It reflects the fragile balance between order and chaos, between control and compulsion, between individual choice and collective behavior. The dancing plague of 1518 is not a mystery that asks to be solved. It is a warning, a reminder that human behavior is shaped by more than reason alone. that under pressure, the mind and body can respond in ways that defy expectation. And that history is filled with moments where people were carried by forces they did not fully understand. In Strasbourg, those forces took the form of dance, a movement without music, a ritual without meaning, a tragedy without a clear cause. And when it ended, it left behind a question that still echoes. If it could happen then, could it happen again?